Absolutely.
Right. So
Absolutely.
so it did reflect who he was, the act.
In other words, okay, what I mean, it didn't reflect who he was. It means that he was not what I would call a sinner in a sense of that. In other words, his personality was a servant of God. His personality was about tshuva, right? And if anything, that hesed is a good thing, but it took its toll in the extremity. David then realizes it and tries to always get back into things. And till the end of his life, he's sinning and doing tshuva. Till the end of his life, last thing, the last pedic we have. So, yeah, certainly I would think that would be, an essence of it is what we didn't even talk about is David's personality. There's about ish damim and things like that, and how that would play into it. But that we'll leave for another time.
Okay. Sorry.
Go
Another
ahead.
question. Do you think David's reluctance to fight Amnon had anything to do with Ruth, his great
Right.
grandmother?
So I didn't get into that. It's a very good point. And that certainly is something to think about and put down. Now, remember, Ruth's a Moaviyah, and he certainly he had no problem fighting Moav. But so it is possible. Don't his daughter-in-law is an Ammonite, right? So it's very possible, however, that might have some affinity with that. But again, it's a little hard to say that because he treats Moab and he fights them hard. And at the end, he does fight Ammon. At the end, he fights Ammon and really is tough on them at the end. I mean, you read the end of that chapter, he fights Ammon. And maybe that could be post-tshuva, after this whole situation, he joins the battle. The battle's almost over.
Right.
But he joins it. Hazal say that Yoav wanted to give him but nevertheless, he does enter into the battle. So it's possible.
Wait, one more.
Go ahead.
Instead, Abadanel had a problem with the get idea because when Uriah comes back, he says, "Go home to your
Right.
Isha." But it makes sense because the get would only be enacted if Uriah died. It wouldn't be like we're divorced now when you go to battle,
Right.
even if you come
You're
back.
assuming that the get is. You're assuming like Rashi that it's a get al Tanai, right? If it's a get al Tanai, that part of it by sending him home would be okay. Tosfot would be saying that it's a pure get, would be a problem. But you're right. If you follow Rashi, sending him home is less of the problem. The only problem with sending him home, if you follow Rashi, is that, or really if you follow Rashi in general, we have another question. How does David rely on a get and have relations with her that he's about to invalidate by sending him home? That's another problem. You're right. But Abarbanel's problem would only assume that it's not a get al Tanai.
Did they do that though? Did they have a clean-cut divorce like they're not married?
So that's already a mahal. We don't know because this is the only source about these gitin, and we don't know exactly what happened. But it is that Gemara. There is a mahluk that I understand between Rashi and Tosfot. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that the fact that he married Bathsheba is something maybe more of a praise, but the way the pasuk presents it, seems to be presented under rebuke as part of the sin.
Right, was he saying that because it says "V'tishkol karta"? Right. So, like I said, I think the Hazal, when they say "Tishkol karta," it's not. It seems to be on the maaseh because the lakata likuhim, and I think that's the critique, and maybe in that context, killing him and then marrying the wife looks a little difficult. But I would say that if anything over there, by the fact that he sees that level of responsibility, like I said, might have some tinge of positive to him.
According to Abarbanel, how is David's teshuvah enough to escape with his life? If somebody murders, even if you're the king, murdering and sleeping with somebody's wife, that does not, like, even if you do teshuvah, you still get the death penalty.
Right. So there you're dealing with the legality. And that very may be why Hazal are looking at the legal points and saying, mitzad, and that's not what Natan could very well, God should say, why is God even sending Natan? Right? Just say, okay, he has to be killed, so who's going to kill the king? God say, I'll do it, and we'll just have a battle and David dies. Rather, that's the whole point. The whole point here, I think, is to teach the message of Teshuvah and to teach that whole concept of that even the Melech has somebody to answer to, and even the Melech has to do Teshuvah. And I think this is David is a setup for future offspring of his and his kids, that they're all going to make mistakes, and they're all going to have a Nevi yell at them. It's very rare, I think almost never, that they actually do Teshuvah when they're rebuked. And I think that's the point here that needs to be said. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen.